Welcome back to Balancing Chaos with
Kelley
and Gretchen. And today we have a special guest, and this is someone Kelley knows. So Kelley, I'm going to let you let her introduce herself.
Okay, so today we have my friend Sara, who has done the coolest thing that I've ever heard of, and I can't wait for her to tell you all about it. So Sara, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Now, Sara, are you still in Bali?
No, I'm in Portugal.
Oh my gosh, I can't even keep up with you. So Sara and I met in graduate school at Northeastern, and I don't know, how long after we met did you decide to do this adventure?
Probably 2 years.
So I get an email from Sara one day, and she said, oh, I'm going to do this awesome thing. I'm going to do remote year. And I had never heard of it. Of course, I Googled it right away. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about remote year and what motivated you to do it and how you got the courage to basically leave your well set up life in Massachusetts and travel the world?
Well, at that time, I had been teaching part-time online. I teach online nursing courses for Northeastern, and I was curious about moving, and I was looking into other cities, and I came across this program, and it's geared for online professionals who want to travel. So they accommodate, they give you a workspace, a living space, and they give you an itinerary for a year, and you're with a community of people who are working in a similar fashion. We all work online. And, you know, we just move around for a year, and it was a great journey.
So you went to a different country every month, correct?
Yes.
And did they assign your rooms, and how did the arrangements work and the travel accommodations? Like, tell me everything they did.
Yes. I mean, there's kind of room assignments, but you know, you can request certain things. With a group of 60 people, you'll find people that you like, that you want to live with. Some of the accommodations, depending on the cities, were single rooms, single apartments. Sometimes you had roommates, so it was different every month. But you could, you know, make requests if you really wanted to.
So so you're traveling with all of the same 60 people from country to country, or does it change every month?
No, same people.
So tell me all the places you went.
We started in Valencia, Spain, and we went to Lisbon, Portugal. So it's here in July 2016. And then we went to Morocco, and then Sofia, Bulgaria, and then we went to Serbia, and then we went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, and then Buenos Aires. We did Argentina, technically. We did that country for 2 months. We were in Buenos Aires for 1 month, and Cordoba for another month. And then we went to Santiago, Chile.
So when you say you're doing this, this is not like a traveling nurse, which I specify just because I know if you went to grad school with Kelley, you have a nursing degree of some type.
Correct.
So you're still teaching online?
Correct. I teach 3 online sections for Northeastern.
And are all of the people that are traveling with you, are they all online teachers or just various online careers?
Various online careers.
What other types of careers do they do, or what types of people did you meet?
It's been interesting to see what different fields are online. A great deal of them are tech people, so there is coders and software developers, but there's been writers and lawyers and travel bloggers and just online advertising in some very different fields.
Do you pay them, or how does that work that you end up with this group?
Correct. I pay them. So instead of paying rent in Boston, I paid this company to have this workspace and living space. So I just need Wi-Fi to work, really. So I just change my living area for every month.
And is it cheaper to travel the world than to live in Boston?
In some ways, it is. I don't have a car. I don't have utility payments anymore. So I did, own my apartment in Boston, and so it is about the same. I would say cost of living wise is about the same, even with the plane tickets.
So tell me about your favorite place that you visited.
I don't think I have a favorite place. It's just, I don't know, all around the world, there's just so much beautiful, different parts of the world are so beautiful. I do love Portugal, which is why I'm back here. I do love Bali, which is where I was for several months prior to this. But it's been amazing, just, the different cultures, the different food, the different ways of life. But for the most part, everyone's just living life, just working. And it's just been amazing.
So what did you all do during the day? Did you get together and work, or did you guys do activities together? Did you develop really strong friendships?
You do. And so within 60 people, you do. We were a very work-oriented group. So Monday through Friday, our workspace was pretty active, depending on whether you worked set U.S. hours or not. So some people had to be in the workspace at certain times. I had a little flexibility with mine. So, but I did Monday through Friday, have a regular routine. And then, lunch or, weekends, or if we wanted to be flexible and do things. The program does incorporate events. They call them track events, where you do either a cultural experience or you go see some sightseeing events, or it's an activity. And so it's within 60 people, you will bond with them. So, it becomes quite an experience for 1 year to travel and work and, experience life with what is strangers at the beginning, but at the end is very much a community.
So you did it for 1 year, but you said 2016. So are you still doing it, or are you now working on your own and traveling on your own?
I'm somewhat traveling on my own. One perk of the program is that you get to jump back into other cities or other programs that are in cities. So I have crossed paths with other groups from remote year. Otherwise, I've been traveling on my own. It's somewhat of a lifestyle for me right now. Again, I just need Wi-Fi, and I just travel around and spend my nights and weekends and exploring, and my daytimes working from cafes.
So where are you sleeping? How do you find accommodations on your own?
Mostly Airbnb.
I love Airbnb.
mostly Airbnb, or sometimes I'm going and visiting friends or family and staying with them.
So speaking of friends and family, what did your friends and family say when you embarked on this? Were you living near them when you left? Or was it just that much different?
I was in Boston, and most of my friends, I have a small group of very close friends there, and they were mostly supportive. And then my family is in California or in New York. So for the most part, I think they see me just as much. They do come to visit. So it's been great. I think they've been loving. It's a different lifestyle. I get to have an adventure, much different than my friends are experiencing right now. But it's my authentic way of living life right now. It's it makes me happy to be able to see the world and to still be working at the same time.
So just to be clear, you had, in addition to your part-time online job before you did this, you had a very good job as a nurse. I'm assuming making a decent salary. So what would you say? So what would you say to someone who may be considering something like this? Because I think a lot of times people want to do things, but they're nervous about, or they're fearful to do something like this, to lose the income or lose the stability, the comfort.
Yes, I was a nurse at the Jimmy Fund, and I love working at the hospital. I very much miss working at the hospital. I do think that after, I've been traveling for 2 years, so I have established that being with a patient population, it does give me the sense of purpose and passion in my career. So, but for right now, this is a work-life balance that I'm enjoying. So, continuing with that, it was a pay cut. Nonetheless, it was a pay cut for me, about 50%. Again, it's just me. So adjusting a lifestyle is, kind of down to the individual. But depending on where you're a nurse and, what you're doing, it's, maybe not that much of a pay cut, but it does remote work in general does pay less, and then academics doesn't tend to pay as much as staff nursing. But the reality is there's a great work-life balance to this career choice, and for me, the pay cut has been worth it.
Mm-hmm. And because you're working for a U.S. university, you don't have to deal with. Are you just on a travel visa, or do you have to deal with work visas, or how do the logistics work?
Correct. I'm on a travel visa. This is nothing to do with my job. What I do for my living is online, and then my off times is spent in another country, but on a tourist visa.
Have you been back to the States at all since you left?
10 days. 10 days.
All at once, or like one day at a time?
No, just 10 days all at once. It was actually cheaper for me to go from Cuba to Iran by passing through New York.
Oh. So what do you think about what's happening here in the United States compared to the other countries where you've been traveling?
Well, it's interesting. I was out of the country when Trump was elected. So it's been interesting to see the shift in people's way of talking. People do want to talk about politics quite often while traveling. When you're in a restaurant or a bar, strike up a conversation with a local. Sometimes they might not know a lot of English, but they know the names of the presidents. So they transitioned from Obama and with usually big smiles and thumbs up, and now they say Trump, and they kind of look at you to see how you judge them saying it. And it's the other things have been interesting to notice while traveling, particularly there's no guns in a lot of the countries that I'm in, and it's a striking sense of security that I think I notice in countries that now that do have it. So that's just kind of been just one cultural thing I've noticed moving around, and just different populations and the way they eat, and Asian cultures, and their food is so fresh and so healthy, and their portion sizes are so interesting. And then coming back to Europe, and how different they eat over here, and how rich some of their food is, but it's so good at the same time. It's been, culturally, it's just been a great assessment to go around and, see how different people live their lives.
So were you able to vote in the election even though you were overseas?
I did an absentee ballot.
So now, is your plan to return to the U.S.?
My plan is to eventually return. I just don't know when that is. I am getting tired. I would like to do, some more slow travel, which takes a little bit more work and planning. You have to figure out which countries you have extended, visas in, and where you can stay more than a month or so. So it'd be nice to just travel with purpose a little bit more. So, goal setting a little bit on my personal side, which would be I would really like to really learn Spanish. So I would like to, go stay in a Spanish speaking country for a while and get involved there, and stay put in a city long enough to right now, it seems when I get to know a city, it's right when I'm starting to ready to go. So it would be nice to stay in a city long enough to get to know a place.
So we've been living through Trump and guns here
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S. So it sounds like I heard you say a lot of benefits of traveling, particularly the food, which I am so happy to hear you say, because I go.
I can tell why you're friends.
Yeah, I go out. Oh my gosh, I go out
Food and guns.
Yeah, I go out. Gretchen's very passionate about all the politics, and I'm very passionate about the food. And I said, if you read into the food, you would be equally as angry as me. And of course, healthcare. I'm sure you've been in countries with universal healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So based on your experience in other countries, what do you perceive as strengths of the U.S.? Because lately, all we talk about is negatives, and we're just frustrated a lot. So from your perspective, what do you think we still have going for us over here?
I mean, we do set the standard of care as far as, what we consider process and technique. I did have the experience of going into a couple hospitals, whether it was to support friends or I did have a couple of tours of some hospitals while traveling. And just based on our quality of care, I went to one hospital that had absolutely no pumps. Everything's on roller clamps and, shared rooms and just curtains between patients. And, it's a nursing that I vaguely remember right at the transition of those periods. But, they still provide a very good quality of care. They still provide very good outcomes. So you're seeing very good nursing and good care, whether or not you have state of the art, rooms and, the space or new construction or whatnot. So I think it was very enlightening. It's eye-opening to see how global health kind of functions in that way. The price of medications or vaccinations across traveling has been quite interesting. It's very much cheaper for me to do even my dental work, even with copays, to do it while I'm traveling. So it's just been quite interesting to live life with no U.S. health insurance for 2 years and manage my healthcare within that. And, travel insurance is one-fourth the price of 1 year of state insurance. So there's more incentive in that.
So you have no health insurance right now?
I have travel insurance. So it's insurance while abroad. So it doesn't cover me in the States.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that you teach nursing or healthcare related classes.
I do. I teach.
Okay.
I teach nursing informatics primarily. That's been consistent. I often teach a capstone course and then a master's professional development course.
And do you share your experiences of your travel with your students? Do they know that you're traveling, or do you also like go the next step and talk about the differences that you've seen in other nations and all that kind of stuff?
I have just started mentioning that I'm traveling. Sometimes it's a distraction. The students have more emails about where I am or what I'm doing. So I kind of just only relay it if it has to do with time change issues or travel issues where I can't access my email to respond in a quick time or something like that. For right now, my travel is very much my personal life, so I do try to compartmentalize a little bit with that.
And also, I think the online classes they have to remain as consistent as possible across sections.
Correct. So, yeah. I mean, at least that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you covering all your sections for each class, or are there multiple professors for each?
There's multiple professors for each. So it's been nice over the years, because it's been repetitive courses, to kind of set a structure, especially the informatics course, that the three of us work very closely to constantly refresh and update the course and update the sources.
Mm-hmm. Now, your father immigrated to the United States?
Both my parents did.
Okay, both your parents did. So what is their and your perception or feelings about what's been happening recently with DACA and all of the immigration drama?
I think it's, for my parents, they came before the revolution. They came for college. Then the revolution happened, and they decided to stay in the States. So I think at that time, the U.S. was just a different place. I think now that I've been traveling, and the way that the States is going, their relations with Iran directly, but just immigrants in general, has just made my family feel a little bit more comfortable with me exploring. It's a weird feeling to think that you don't have to live where you were raised. My parents immigrated and went to a different side of the world to start their life and have their family. So there's no reason to think that I couldn't. And especially right now, with the way, technology works, I could have a life inside and outside of the U.S.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I was just actually talking about this earlier today. So my family, we're planning a vacation to Jamaica. We're not moving there or anything, but my sister was all nervous because she said, "Oh, I just read that there's like a travel advisory and there are parts that are dangerous." And I was like, "Kate, you live in Denver, which is the home of Columbine, the home of the Aurora movie theater shooting, like the Walmart shooting. Like, it's okay. Like, we are just as dangerous." So somebody else kind of made a comment about, "Oh, well, I heard Jamaica's really dangerous." So I actually went to a UK government site to look up the travel information for the US. And I'm like, look what they say about us. Yeah. Like, why are, you think, just like, of course, like, oh, there's a lot of guns in the United States, and you're likely to be safe. However, here are all these multiple terrorist attacks of domestic terrorism using high-powered rifles. So basically, you're not safe anywhere. Exactly. But the perception was like, oh, well, I heard that there was like bad gang violence in Jamaica, which there is, but we're not going there to sell drugs in a gang neighborhood. We're going to a resort. So my sister calmed down after that. But it's sort of interesting to have that outsider. I think it's important for Americans to look at what other people are thinking about us, because there's this sense of superiority sometimes of like, oh, every place is worse than here. And it's not the case.
Of course. And, the U.S. is a role model in many ways for politics and, for capitalism, I wouldn't say healthcare is our number one, but they do pay attention to the way we spend and the trends that we set. So it's been interesting to watch how the politics have changed that, or how the advancements of other country really just have changed that. So there's a lot more of an even playing field. When you get out in the world, you see that many countries are living their life, and they have happy work-life balance, and their kids are educated, and makes you wonder what we work so hard for in the States, and why we seem so imbalanced sometimes.
It's interesting to hear you say that you have people in every country are interested in or aware of what's happening in the United States. I went to an international health conference, and I came home depressed, honestly, because the United States, in terms of healthcare, we were basically the butt of every joke. Everyone was watching us from all the countries and talking about how terrible our outcomes are and how messed up our values are. And it's so interesting because, like you said, Gretchen, we often think we're the best. Everyone wants to be us, and we don't look at the great things other countries are doing that we're actually quite behind on in a lot of areas, especially the food. And the healthcare, of course.
Which are tied together, right, Kelley?
Exactly. Gosh.
So how many countries have you been to since you embarked on this journey?
About 36.
And is that every continent except Antarctica? Or maybe including Antarctica?
No, I have not been to Antarctica yet, but maybe next year.
Have you been to Australia?
I did. I just went there. It was amazing.
I love Australia.
I do too.
I would move there if it wasn't so far away from home.
It is very, very far away.
It just truly is the other side of the world. Have you been to Jamaica?
No, I have not been to Jamaica.
I'm going to Jamaica in a couple of weeks.
Very nice.
And my son, there's a child in my son's class who immigrated here from Jamaica. The mother's a nurse at the hospital. And he is very concerned about us going to Jamaica because the student told him that it's very dangerous there and that his parents, they had to leave because it's so dangerous. And he is stressed about the fact that we're going there.
Well, because one of the things is that tourism is like the biggest, economy driver for Jamaica. So tourists are going to be protected at all costs so that you say good things and make other people come.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried at all.
Yeah.
I might be more nervous if I was like, I'm going to go by myself and I'm going to backpack and just get on this bus and see where I end up, which is like what I did when I went to Australia. But I probably wouldn't want to do that in Jamaica.
Yeah. Depends on where you're staying and.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And so traveling, so now you're kind of traveling on your own, is that right?
Correct.
So how have you run into any issues traveling on your own as a woman?
I mean, globally, there's an issue with catcalling and machismo in general. As a woman, it's my travel habits do change whether I'm with a group or not. So if I'm really by myself, I tend to explore during the day and I work at nights because I don't like to, go to restaurants or bars by myself. But if I'm with friends and family, that's when I kind of get to enjoy some nightlife. So travel habits do change, and men are have their habits. You do notice cultural innuendos from country to country, that the way some countries stare more, some are more verbal, some will, invade personal space. But I have never, fortunately, I've never had a bad incident.
When you were on remote year, were there any romances that occurred? Not necessarily for you personally, but within the 60? Within
60 people, there are natural occurrences. But I think there's a lot of growth that goes on during the year. So I think in the end of it, most people come out growing a lot, whether or not some relationships do stick. And we do have couples that stay together and some relationships that don't. But I think that, you just understand that you're having experiences with people while you're traveling and that ends. And there's a lot of growth in that too.
So no one's been married from this original 60 or anything like that?
Well, we do have a wedding coming up, but they did come on to the program dating. They got engaged during the program. So
okay. Yeah. I'm picturing like
Kelley wants her bachelor moment.
Exactly. I'm picturing like bachelorette on remote.
I'm sure
dating.
It'll happen. I mean, I was in the 4th group and they're on group 17 right now. So it's a lot of people I'm sure a genuine love connection during the year will happen.
Thank you, Sara.
So did anyone drop out from the 60 or did most people continue through the whole year?
No. We started with a group of, I believe, 64 and ended with a group of 48, I believe. So people drop out for various reasons, financial, just personal reasons, have to go home for it. For some people, the program wasn't what they expected or wanted. It's 60 people. That's a lot of people. At the beginning, there's a big dynamic of social, getting to know people. So it can be a little bit overwhelming for some introverts, or just getting around 60 people can be a lot. So it takes a couple months to get into the flow of things, and into a routine for yourself, especially because every month you're changing apartments. So it's really hard to structure yourself around that.
Did the 60 people all come from various countries or the United States?
No, we had other countries represented in our group. We had a couple people from England and Ireland and Australia, one girl from Turkey. And then other groups have had other people too. It is open globally, but it is a U.S. company, so you do have to pay them in U.S. currency. So when global events happen, that does affect things. So for a group of people in my cohort, Brexit was a big deal because one day they're paying one price for remote year, and then the next day Brexit happens and the pound plummets and they're paying a much different price.
So is it less expensive for you to do this individually without their group?
It depends in some places, it's more affordable. In others, in Asia, the price point for the program doesn't quite make sense. It's a little cheaper to do it on your own. But in Asia and South America, it's very much, it's affordable. And like I said, you do it more for the community. So,
it almost sounds like the kind of thing that you would do when you're saying, if you were to hear somebody talking about, oh, I travel around the world and I work remotely, and you're like, wow, that sounds amazing. How would I ever begin to do that? It almost sounds like it's like a training program on how to live and work and travel remotely and do all that.
It very much was. So I definitely wasn't an experienced traveler before this program. So it got me very comfortable with the logistics of planning it. And for the most part, if you can book yourself a room, and you have Wi-Fi so you can work and you've got a place to sleep and you can feed yourself, then you can pretty much figure everything else out.
How much? So you must live a pretty minimalist lifestyle.
I do. I live out of about 30 kilos of luggage. Two pieces of luggage on my laptop bag.
So what is the one thing other than your laptop that you absolutely make sure you have room for in your bags?
Oh, that's a hard question. I have a yoga mat. The yoga mat's a necessity for stretching and just using that often. Having one routine when you're going to a new place all the time is very nice. So the yoga mat is one routine that I've enjoyed. I have a candle or incense. Generally, I like smells, so I like to come home to an apartment that smells familiar, even though it's a different apartment all the time. Mm-hmm. I have slippers that I really like. So they're just little things that are easy to carry, obviously, that remind me of home or that make me feel like home.
And what do you miss most about a traditional Massachusetts nurse lifestyle?
I do miss I miss the routine of coworkers. I mean, being an online educator I have interaction with my students, but a lot of it is grading feedback, so it's not really interacting. And our conversations are good, but there's no camaraderie or whatnot. So I do miss having coworkers. I miss interacting with my patients, and I miss I miss Boston in general, like getting off after work and walking home through the city. Just life, like a regular, comfortable life. And that way, there's an element of uncomfortableness when you're traveling all the time. Nothing quite feels like home.
Now, are you eating out most of your meals, or do you cook meals?
It depends.
How are you navigating the food?
It depends on the kitchen.
Yeah.
It depends on the place I'm staying and the kitchen I have for that month. So sometimes if it's a nice kitchen, a fully equipped kitchen, or if the grocery store is convenient, I'll use it a lot. For the most part, when you're traveling, eating for one is sometimes a lot cheaper to eat out. So I do eat, and eating out is a big way of how I explore a city. I pick a neighborhood and I explore it by way of eating through it. So, yeah, it's not always a big thing, but I do really miss cooking. I do miss cooking on a regular basis.
So do you feel like you've been able to eat relatively healthy through all the countries? Or do you feel healthy? Sometimes I know when I travel, I always come back feeling like, oh gosh, I feel horrible.
Yeah, it depends where I am. I went to Japan and I definitely just overindulged there. The food and the ramen is just incredible, but very salty at the same time. So it depends where I am, but like Kuala Lumpur is a city that I tend to go. It's a hub in Asia, so I tend to pass through there quite often. And I have a routine there with a gym and a place that I like to stay. And so like when I'm there, I feel very healthy. When I'm in Bali, I feel very healthy. Because of all the yoga, and their food is generally very fruit-based and fresh. So it just depends where I am. But now I'm back in Europe, and I love their sweets. And thank God Lisbon has hills, and there's quite a bit of walking here, so that's good.
What would be, if you were to move back to the U.S. or really anywhere, and you were moving back into an apartment, what would be the first thing that you would buy to add to that you would have?
I probably would buy less. I think if anything, I realize how much commercialism is in the U.S. The 10 days I was in the States, I was kind of shocked because right now all I watch is Netflix or Amazon TV, so I really don't get commercials quite often, and I was quite amazed by how much commercials and the desire to want to spend was present when I was in the States. So, I've lived out of the same bag for nearly 2 years. I have bought very little. I only buy what I need. I buy what I use. And that was not the lifestyle I had before. And so I think I would very much go into the next phase of my life with that mindset.
Yeah, I have friends who are retired, and they retired fairly early. They're in their 50s, and they sold their house, and their kids live in California. They lived here, and I don't know what they have in their storage unit in California, but they have something out there. But they travel around the world, and they're a married couple, and they call them silver nomads.
Yep.
And they go from country to country, and he will sends the emails to my husband, who sends them to me. And be like, well, we had a dog sitting gig in Australia for 3 months, and they found, there's this whole network of people that are sort of traveling around. And it reminds me of those maps like the flight maps, where you see all the flights going back and forth, and you don't, when you're in your plane, you don't realize that there's thousands of other planes swirling around you. And I feel like there's probably that same network of travelers. So they have traveled. They've been Greece, Australia, Thailand. They started in Mexico, and then when they get bored, they just pack up their suitcases and they pick another spot to go, and they live so cheaply. Even as retired people, like Mexico was like $1,000 a month for them to live well in a little apartment. So it's fascinating to follow their travels.
Yeah, I mean, that's a term in Australia, the green nomads, they call them. They just live in their camper vans because that country was really it's beautifully made for van life, and they just drive up and down the coast and enjoy the scenery.
So do you think you'll get a tiny house when you settle down?
I will say that my apartment in Boston felt like a tiny house regardless. So I think I'm used to small quarters, but yeah, I don't need very much, and this year has proven that. So wherever I end up, it will be minimal.
Did you sell your Boston apartment, or do you still own it?
No, I own it. It's rented to two very, very nice girls.
Oh, that's great.
When you think about, right now you're doing this basically for indefinitely. Is that right?
I mean, indefinitely, but knowing that there's an end, an expiration to it. Traveling like this it's hard on your body. It's, exhausting, moving every month, and it's hard to build relationships and new friendships in this manner too. So I am in most ways, I'm looking for a place to want to settle down. So for the most part, I'm going to spend the next part of the year, the later part of 2018, in Spanish-speaking countries to learn Spanish. So that's my traveling with a goal. In 2019, I'm hoping to finally pick a place to settle down, whether that's in the States or not. Ideally, I would like to be in the States for part of the year and be outside the States for part of the year.
So you do have sort of a timeline for yourself on how you will proceed.
A very loose timeline.
Yeah. And do you think that do you hope to go back to practice or keep teaching online? I
do enjoy teaching online, so I will keep that, but whenever I settle down, if it's stateside, I most definitely would want some sort of hospital position, even if it was per diem. And then if I was outside the States, I would definitely look into global health options.
Mm. Well, and I feel so. I work in higher ed too, so I'm familiar with a lot of what you're talking about on the academic side. Mm-hmm. And it does seem like, at least in the U.S., that there's a really strong need for nurses and for healthcare. Is that true around the world, or is that specific to our own strange sort of healthcare industry here?
No, there's most definitely a global shortage of caregivers, qualified caregivers, no doubt. And whether or not we influence those trends is one thing. We do use more internationally trained nurses than any other country. So it's interesting to see how other countries work. In other countries, teaching is a more valued profession, so their shortage of faculty isn't so much of a factor. In the States, we have two factors that are an issue. Not only do we don't have enough faculty to train the number of nurses that we need, and we have a shortage of the number that we need at the same time. So other countries that have better status for teaching don't have the academic shortage that we have. So it's interesting to look at those trends.
Well, and part of our academic shortages too are that, like you said, you can make more as a practicing nurse mm-hmm. than as a nurse educator or nursing faculty. So that's definitely something that I think any school that has a nursing department feels.
Well, I also think that it's our society's perception in nursing specifically of teaching or working in academia is not as well regarded as if you're working at a hospital. It's still, and I don't know if it's the media or it's nursing itself or what, but if you if I had $1 for how many times I get asked each week, if I tell someone where I work now mm-hmm. and they say, oh, so you don't work at a hospital? And I say, no. And they'll say, oh, so you're not a nurse anymore? No, I am. Actually, no, I am. And I mean, even the way we educate the nurses is predominantly in the hospital. So their belief that nursing exists outside the hospital is skewed.
It's been quite interesting for me to see that you can have a career outside of the hospital. And I'm just starting to look into the networking and jobs for digital nurses and, test bank creators and other app developers. And they're not generally always nursing or sometimes there are other healthcare backgrounds, but it's quite interesting to see that there's a lot that we can do in a digital format, and whether or not we all saw this slow transition of even getting computers into hospitals the way that they are now. So whether or not we could do things where we could take a lot of roles and make them digital for a lot of beneficial reasons. But we could, get a lot of nurses to stay in the field if they physically can't do it, but they're mentally still here. There's so many digital roles that could be useful. There's stay-at-home moms, that could juggle online jobs a lot differently than they could, because nursing is hard. Once you're there, you're stuck there for 12 hours. You can't run out and go to the doctors. You can't run out and grab your kids. And so digital nursing would be a different way of approaching pitching nursing, I should say.
Well, I had the experience with Doctor on Demand with telemedicine as a patient, and that I had a cold sore. I knew I had a cold sore. My option was to go to walk in and sit there for 4 hours at the peak of flu season. But then I remembered about Doctor on Demand. So it was $50 cheaper than a walk-in visit. The doctor had me stick my face up to the camera. And it's one of those things where I knew exactly what I had. I've had them before. The only barrier between me and getting the treatment I needed was a physician to diagnose it.
Exactly.
And I could see a hypochondriac taking super advantage of something like that. You can't use Doctor on Demand for I just broke my arm, But for things like that, it can be amazing. I actually worked in my role. I was helping some nursing faculty at my school test out various telemedicine options. So we tested out this one robot that they were out on an island community here in Maine, and I was in my office and I was driving the robot around the room, and then they hooked up an otoscope to the thing, and then anybody, a 6-year-old, could put the otoscope in a person's ear, but the view goes to the provider to say, oh yes, you have an ear infection, or you just have really hairy ears. I don't know. But I'm obviously not a doctor or a nurse. But they were trying to figure out a solution that they could have nurses and nurse practitioners facilitate care on the island, but get a physician to sign off on those those diagnoses or that kind of stuff, without making the patient, in that case, get on a ferry and get on a boat, drive to the hospital to be checked out.
Absolutely.
But to have a local clinic.
Some of these places I've traveled to, it's been quite amazing to look at how rural places can get, and, what kind of access to care they have, whether it be an emergency or not. We have a think tank group that I'm a member of, and we've gotten to conversations about linking telemedicine with drones, and how that you could send a doctor to somewhere remote like that. It would be kind of cool to think of it, because those are two very easy applications that could functionally work. And it's cool to be at this time of technology, but it's quite amazing how people are living, and how they're getting their care.
And I'm convinced that the Doctor on Demand that I saw was in a home office.
Oh yeah,
it was
definitely.
I mean, it was so there was a plant and a bookshelf, and it was a really the view was really tight. But I was there, and you could kind of see out a window. I'm this is not a clinical setting. You can just tell.
I mean, well, in Maine, I don't know if you're familiar with Maine, but it's a very rural state, and we have significant access issues, and telemedicine is emerging as a potential solution to provide access to a lot of areas of our state. And so there's a major field, I think, for that, and nurses to play a more active role, because a lot of times it's just physicians or nurse practitioners or PAs. But I'd say probably 70% of what happens in primary care could be transitioned with appropriate equipment and process.
Correct.
So, traveling, do you have a favorite travel experience or memory you would share?
I don't think I have, I've had some amazing experiences. I've, climbed Machu Picchu, and, I've been to some beautiful destinations. But honestly, I think it's just the people that I've met. I've made lifelong friends, and I've had experiences with people. But I got what I wanted most out of the year, which was very much a recovery year for myself. And I would say that I had a nice case of nursing burnout. And, I just was, I needed to refresh myself. And I took a year to step back from, what was my career. And I'm lucky that I could do it in a functional way and I could still keep half my job, which was the teaching online. But, I got to travel and I got to meet people and I got to see the world. And I think it's given me a new perspective on how I want to be a nurse.
Cool. Great.
So we always end our shows with the favorite things.
Okay.
So do you have a favorite thing that you'd like to share with us and our listeners?
Favorite thing. Okay. So when I get to a city, my favorite thing to do is to book a food tour because I'm going to usually be there for a month and a food tour will give you 3 to 4 good restaurants, usually in your area. And that's usually like a solid thing to do. And it's my favorite way to just break into a new city.
I've never even heard of a
Me
food
either.
tour.
So they do it in every city?
Pretty much every city.
How do you find it?
Just Google food tour, Lisbon food tour.
We got to start a food tour
wonder
in
if Bangor
Bangor.
has one.
We should do one.
We might.
There we go. There's our summer project, food
Gosh,
tours.
that'd be so fun.
And what's your favorite thing?
My favorite thing, Sarah, and you alluded to this, but Airbnb. I love Airbnb. I've had great experiences on Airbnb. I now much prefer staying in an Airbnb over a hotel.
Yeah.
The concept of Airbnb for me initially really kind of freaked me out because I'm risk averse. And I just thought staying in someone else's house, this is so odd. But I tried it, I don't know, a couple years ago, and I've stayed in a lot of Airbnbs now, and it's awesome. You feel like you're much more integrated into the culture and community than when you're isolated. I think now I feel like hotels are much more isolating.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're staying in a home, so you're in a residential area somewhere that, makes sense, and you have to go with the logistics of a real person's house. And so it's a good thing, but it is one thing to travel and be aware of kind of the imprint that Airbnb is making, because in a lot of cities, like Lisbon or, for example, Barcelona is the hotspot example of this, but people of wealth that don't even live in the city or investors will go and buy up properties and turn them into Airbnbs, which then doesn't allow local people to afford rents or live in the area that they work, or people, older people will get in Lisbon, they're having a problem with this one section of area called Alfama, which is beautiful and very old. But investors are buying out the older people, offering them more money than, they would think. But in reality, they're just buying it out because they want to turn it into investment rentals and Airbnbs. And so that just takes it away from a local, and all the charm of an old neighborhood is disappearing. So there is good things and bad things. Everything has to be in moderation. So this has global tourism, as I've become somewhat a part of it, has been something to pay attention to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So mine's going to be travel related as well. And mine is, which I guess it probably doesn't matter when you're traveling internationally as much, but my TSA Pre Check. And I love that so much. Kelley's laughing because I know I've talked about it. But
I think you already used it as your favorite thing.
I don't think I did. I think I mentioned it, but I don't think I actually made it my favorite thing. So I'm going to make it my favorite thing since it's travel. But it's $85 for 5 years. And it means that you can walk through the lines and you don't have to take off your shoes. You don't have to take off your coat. You don't have to take out your laptop. You don't have to take out your bottles, all of that kind of stuff. And $85 is not a small amount of money. And I don't travel a ton, maybe once or twice a year. But when I broke it down and said, okay, if I flew once a year and someone said, would you like to pay $7.50 to not have to do all of this stuff, I would pay it. So I decided to buy it. And actually, I just convinced my sister to get it because she's got a couple flights coming up this year. And I'm like, you will love it. It will make your life easier, especially when I have kids. My sister has kids. Traveling with kids, it makes it even nicer to not have to deal with getting your shoes on, trying to keep them from running away and all of that kind of stuff. So I do love TSA Pre Check.
You probably forgot what it was like to fly over here.
I
Sarah.
totally don't know. I mean, I am in a whirlwind of airports now. But I don't remember what it's like to be in the States, but it'll be interesting.
I remember when I flew in Australia, because we flew to Australia and then we took a couple flights within Australia. It was so it was just like, okay, get on the plane. I mean, it was nothing compared to what we go through here, and they still served full meals on those planes.
Yeah.
It was very fascinating. Was that
because of Oprah though?
No, it wasn't.
See, when I went to Australia, it was pre 9/11. And
we didn't fly alone. We were with the common folk.
Okay. When I went when I went to Australia, it was pre 9/11, and so what I remember is I had like a 14-hour layover at LAX, and there were all kinds of people who were hanging out and trying to sell you pencils, and like it was just all this like panhandling at the gate, basically, from people who were just passing through. And I remember almost being more uncomfortable in LAX on that long layover my return home than I had been the whole time traveling by myself in Australia, just because it was this sense of people all just right there. So that's the one thing that's one thing I like about our changed security protocols, is that the people at the gate are passengers and you're not constantly being solicited, and I like that a lot. But anyway, well, Sara, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
It was awesome to hear about this. If people wanted to learn more about remote year, is there a website that they can visit?
remoteyear.com.
That's it, remoteyear.com. All right, well, we will make sure to include that in our show notes. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And you're in Portugal now?
I'm in Portugal, yes. I go to Iran next.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Okay. Have fun. I am living vicariously through you. I had to take a break from Facebook recently, which I'm sure you can understand why, but I have been I see your pictures for the past 2 years, and I've been trying to live vicariously through you. What do they call them? Remotes, like when you go for a weekend somewhere else?
Oh, a side trip?
Yeah, side trip. But I thought it said something else. I thought you called it something else. Must have been side trip. It's more than just the 38 countries, because you do all these little quick getaways. I mean, within the same country.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well,
you've been living the dream, Sara.
Well, thank you.
Yes, that's awesome. What a great perspective to have on. And you said you did it because of nursing burnout, and I have to think that this had to have been at least refreshing, if not healing.
It's been fantastic. Yeah. It's just, best decision I ever made.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, have fun.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to our interview with Sara. It was awesome to hear about her story. And if you have enjoyed listening to our podcast, please be sure to tell a couple friends. You can leave a message, leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. We're available any place you can get your podcasts. And we hope you have a great week. Bye.
Bye.